Today should be a good day in the office for a number of reasons. Firstly, I'm driving. I'm driving on my way to the Brecon Beacons. I like the Brecon Beacons, a very nice place to go for a drive. But also because the car that I happen to be driving has a particularly good soundtrack. Welcome on board the Audi R8 Performance Rear-Wheel Drive Edition. The Audi R8, believe it or not, has been around now since 2003. It came along not long after the new millennium as this kind of hurrah piece from Audi. It was their attempt, or their go, at saying, look, we can build supercars too. And a lot of people at the time of its launch, they thought, okay, perhaps it's going to be a bit of a loss leader, something they'll have a stab at. They'll use it as their showpiece of, here's what we could do if we wanted to, but then they'll leave it at that. How wrong those people were, because here we are in 2022 with the latest Audi R8, or one of them at least. This one is quite a special one. This is the R8 Performance Rear-Wheel Drive Edition. That's right, Rear-Wheel Drive Edition. Gone is the Quattro system that we've all known and loved in the Audi R8, the Audi supercar, and instead all of the power is going to the rear wheels only. And what makes it even more interesting, being the performance edition, well, Audi have given it more performance, perhaps unsurprisingly. They've thrown in an additional 30 brake horsepower into the amazing 5.2 litre naturally aspirated V10 and got rid of the stability system that makes it so reliable and safe and sensible to drive. Quattro, it's gone. Now this, as press cars go, is quite an interesting one because usually press cars are spec'd up to the nines. They are given every single option available so that people like me drive them. Then I talk to people like you and I get all excited about all the gadgets and gizmos that it's got in the hope that you go and spend your money on them and buy them. But this one hasn't. This is a Billy basic spec. In fact, this car has two options. Firstly, the RWD crystal metallic paint and slightly bigger wheels than you'd get as standard. That's it. Everything else, bog standard. Standard radio system, standard audio system, standard comfy seats, no ability to upgrade or change or alter the damper settings on the suspension. It is an out-of-the-box product, bog standard. You see, now, usually I'd be moaning, perhaps critical, about the fact that there's no premium sound system, there's no magical infinite scale of gadgets that I can play with, there's no big luxuries like massaging seats or even upgraded seats of any variety at all. These are just the bog standard comfort seats. But all of that is excused with one particular thing. That thing, the engine. See, now, even without an upgraded sound system, the sound system in here is actually pretty good with regards to listening to music. But you don't need to listen to music. In fact, do you even need a sound system at all? Because there is an audio track in here that comes as standard, no cost option, and that is a naturally aspirated V10 engine that sounds like this. Now, there will be people watching this video that will have a far better understanding than I do about why V10s sound so good. There is some sort of psychological, deep-rooted reason why we as human beings and we as petrol heads love the sound of a V10. It's something to do with the frequency that comes from tiny little cylinders that rev high and make this wonderful fruity noise. All I know is I love the way that it sounds. I would go as far as saying that the naturally aspirated V10, you find in an R8 like this, is the best sounding out of the box engine that you can buy. No exhaust trickery, no aftermarket bits and pieces, nothing on the induction. This thing is exactly as it sounds straight out the factory, and nobody does it better than Audi. You could argue that the R8 is now on borrowed time, firstly because of the format of the car and of course the big engine in the back. The naturally aspirated 5.2 litre V10 is much the same as it has been since Audi first showed us the R8 back in the early noughties. Of course, the car and the engine have both been refined and improved with time, and the performance is now a lot better than it was. But we are approaching that time where utilising engines like that and having engines in general in cars it's not going to last for much longer. We're getting close to the end of the era of things like glorious naturally aspirated V10 supercar engines, because of course, well, they all need to go away. So what Audi are doing, much like many other car manufacturers at the moment, is they are putting all of their time, effort and engineering into the last hurrah versions of their big engine supercars. Now, the engine itself has been improved and remapped, and the power output has been increased by just under 30 brake horsepower. But of course, the other big change is the drivetrain. The Audi R8 has been famously regarded since its launch as a quattro supercar, a four-wheel drive car. This one has got rid of the front differential and is sending all of the power to the back. That's quite a bold move by Audi in upping the power and then removing the four-wheel drive system. But for me, I think this is brilliant. This car feels leery, it feels light and nimble. I don't know what the exact weight saving is by removing the front diff, if any at all, but it feels lighter, the steering feels far more engaging, and with all the power at the back, this thing feels properly fun to drive. Now, due to new laws and rules, the engine and the noise it produces are actually a little bit quieter than they have been on previous models, and I've heard a few of my media colleagues and journalist friends moaning about that, saying that it's lost its charm, it's lost some of that raucous brilliance. But I have to say, I think it sounds fine. If anything, it's done what the Audi R8 has always been doing different to the other supercar manufacturers. It's always been a little bit less shouty. This, as many people will know, shares many of the underpinnings and the powertrain with the Lamborghini Huracan, but you can't compare the two. The Lamborghini Huracan is shouty and aggressive and noisy and raucous and rude. The R8, it's, well, it wears a suit. It looks smart and it's just a bit more acceptable for day-to-day use. But of course, the joy with the R8, despite its sensible and smart outlook, is the fact that when you want it to be an absolute hooligan, it can be. So let's talk about the power and performance. This, being the rear-wheel drive version, is actually a detuned version in comparison to the Quattro. The Quattro, the big powerful one, the performance edition, has 620 horsepower, whereas this, the rear-wheel drive one, has been restricted to just 570. What I will say though is I think that is plenty, considering you haven't got front wheels also pulling you along, assisting with traction. 570 is more than enough. 550 newton meters of torque as well. We're kind of now into the territory of turbocharged V8s.
This, being a naturally aspirated V10 with 550 newton meters of torque and 570 horsepower, is plenty. Take it from me. And with those figures, of course, come some impressive stats. 0 to 60 miles an hour is claimed at I'd say conservatively claimed, 3.7 seconds. Now, the reason I say conservatively claimed is because Audi do have a tendency of over-quoting their numbers or under-quoting performance. Not sure which way I've got that correct or incorrect. Anyway, most people have been testing the 0 to 60 speed on their Audi R8 Performance Rear-Wheel Drive Edition, and they've actually been seeing a 0 to 60 time closer to around 3.4 or 3.5 seconds versus Audi's 3.7. We are now also in the 200 mile per hour club for the rear-wheel drive R8. Previously, it didn't quite get there. It was around 194. Now, with the new Performance Edition, the top speed is 207 miles an hour. So what about the interior of the car and the just general comfort of driving? Well, as Audi have been good at doing for many, many years, they've made a really lovely aesthetic and ergonomic product. There are a lot of people that drive these on the taller side of life that say that perhaps it's a little bit cramped, and that was one of the common comments I got when I first mentioned on Instagram that I was going to be driving one of these, that perhaps I'd be too tall at 6'1". But I'd say, whilst it's not the most spacious interior, I'm not feeling like I'm particularly cramped at all. If I could make one adjustment, it would be that I could just lower the driver's seat down just a smidge, just to alter the driving position, but that would be it. And that may well be just a contrast of having the comfort seats as opposed to the sports seats that might have a better position or the ability to adjust a little bit lower than these ones. Now, the interior of the R8 hasn't really changed much at all in the past few years, but that doesn't really matter because it's still a really smart and stylish place to be. There's no center screen in the R8 anymore. Everything is now controlled on the instrument cluster in front of you, and I'm pleased to say there's not a touch screen button in sight. Everything is controlled by physical buttons, including the interface. And if you plug your phone in, you get Apple CarPlay too, and that also goes onto the main screen. I thought that might be a little bit clunky at first, but it actually works really, really well. Storage-wise, there's plenty of it in here. You've got big bins either side on the door pockets. You've got a nicely sized glove box. You've even got a bit of storage behind the driver and passenger seat as well for squishy bags and cases. The front storage is actually really good. It means you can put in quite happily a carry-on case, the kind of thing you'd put in an overhead locker on an aeroplane. And then with the additional bits and pieces of room in here, it's fairly easy, I'd say, to go on a road trip and carry a whole load of equipment with you. £132,000 or thereabouts will get you this Audi R8 Performance Rear-Wheel Drive Edition, and I have to say, I think it's money well spent. Yes, you're going to end up spending a bit more on certain options like upgraded seats, and I probably would personally opt for the upgraded sound systems as well. But other than that, you don't really have to worry about much more because the car simply has everything you need. So, to conclude, the Audi R8 Performance Rear-Wheel Drive Edition is, in a word, fun. Admittedly, it's not going to be for everyone. I think there'll be an awful lot of people that will always prefer the idea of a four-wheel drive supercar and, of course, a four-wheel drive Audi R8. And I completely get that. I think that's completely fair. This is a lot of power to go through the rear wheels. It does require quite a bit of attention whilst you're driving. And as I have been over the past week, if you find yourself driving in torrential rain, then it can be quite a engaging drive, shall we say. That said though, the car itself is fantastic. The general geometry and setup of the car is brilliant, as is the traction control systems, which of course you have two. One, to have a kind of happy halfway, the ability to slide the car and move the car around a little bit whilst keeping everything in check, and of course the completely full off version for absolute hooliganing. And I guess that is the kind of crux of what makes this car so good. It gives you the ability to be the gentleman supercar, the quiet, the refined, the sensible version of a not so sensible genre of car, right up until the point that you want to be an absolute hooligan, and you can be it in this car. The Audi R8 is a fantastic thing. I love it a lot. And I have to say, I think I prefer this, the rear wheel drive, over the Quattro version. Well, that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to support the channel, please do feel free to subscribe. You'll see plenty more content like this that we've already filmed, and we've got plenty more in the pipeline as well. It is also worth mentioning that if you want to see more automotive content along the similar lines to this, then don't forget to check out our website, drivenchat.com, where you will there see photographs, videos, written reviews, and of course our entire back catalogue of the Driven Chat podcast, our weekly podcast that comes out every single week, every single Monday morning, with a different guest from the automotive world. You can find them all on the website, or alternatively wherever you get your podcasts from, just search for the Driven Chat podcast and you can find it there as well. For now, I'll say thank you so much once again for joining us, and I look forward to bringing you more content just like this very, very soon. For now, I'm off to make some more noise.